Hello and welcome to the 4th Annual Federal Research Update webinar. My name is Dr. Heather Brown. I'm the Director of Grant Writing and Publications at the University of Missouri-Columbia. This event is sponsored by the University of Missouri-Columbia, the National Association of College and University Business Officers, and the Florida High-Tech Corridor Council, an economic development initiative of the State University System of Florida. Before we begin today, just want to say that our thoughts and prayers are with the folks affected by Hurricane Sandy. We hope that you are all safe and recovering as best as you can. Thank you to everyone who was able to join us today. If you have any technology problems or questions or concerns, please send an email to federalupdate@missouri.edu. Each of our presenters will be answering questions at the end of their presentation, so if you have a question you would like addressed, please send it to federalupdate@missouri.edu. And finally, we have viewers joining us from across the country, and as a result, we will be using, instead of specific times, phrases such as top of the hour and bottom of the hour to indicate when our next speaker will begin. So joining us right now is Dr. Elizabeth Albro. Dr. Albro is currently Acting Commissioner of the National Center for Education Research, Institute of Education Sciences at the U.S. Department of Education. She received her doctorate in psychology from the University of Chicago and served on the Child Development and Education faculty at Whittier College and on the psychology faculty at Wheaton College in Norton, Massachusetts. She has spent the past decade overseeing research programs in the areas of reading and writing and cognitive science at the National Center for Education Research. Dr. Albro, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. I know it's been a crazy past couple of days, but I'm going to talk with you about some important things, I hope, for your institutions. Funding opportunities at the Institute of Education Sciences. For those of you who have heard me present, welcome back, and hopefully I have some new information in this presentation for you. So great, I'm going to get going here. Just a brief overview for those of you who are not familiar with the Institute of Education Sciences. We are the research arm of the United States Department of Education, and today I'm going to talk about funding opportunities that are available through our two research centers, the National Center for Education Research, where I sit, and the National Center for Special Education Research, which is our, what we like to call our sister center, focused particularly on carrying out research in the area of special education. Many of the programs that we both offer or compete are very similar and parallel in structure, so you'll notice as I go through the slides today that there is overlap between the requirements across those two, and I'll try to make that clear, but please do feel free to ask any questions if you have any. So let me talk a little bit about the priorities that the Institute of Education has and how those serve to undergird our funding opportunities. So we have a legislative mission. We were authorized by Congress in 2002, and we are charged with doing three overarching things. The first is to describe the condition and progress of education in the United States, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with the National Center for Education Statistics, and NCES is responsible primarily for doing this particular task. Our second main charge is to identify education practices that improve academic achievement and access to education opportunities. That is really what I take as one of the primary charges of the two research centers. So we support research carried out across the country, and really what we're hoping to do is to identify and develop and test education practices. Finally, we are also charged with evaluating the effectiveness of federal and other education programs. In order to do that, the National Center for Education Evaluation serves as the independent evaluator for many federal programs such as Title I, 21st Century Schools, Historically Reading First, and they are charged with carrying out national evaluations of these programs. Through our research grants, we do also have funding opportunities for evaluation, and I'll talk about those in a little bit. For those of you who are interested in hearing more about the priorities of the director, I want to refer you to the page on our website where the National Board for Education Sciences, our advisory board, includes information about their priorities, the members of the board, agendas, and minutes from our meetings. to take away from the director's priorities, so John Easton is our current director, and he has a series of priorities, many of which should be familiar to many of you, that speak about the need to fund research to support the academic improvement of students, to provide information about how to support the non-academic environment. But I want to highlight two particular pieces of his priorities that are really driving our research efforts, both this current fiscal year and in the future. The first is that Director Easton is very interested in continuing to increase the work that we support in partnership with stakeholder groups. So across the centers, we are encouraging researchers to develop partnerships with stakeholder groups to advance the relevance of the Institute's work, the accessibility of its reports, and the usability of its findings, so that what we produce can be useful for the day-to-day work of education practitioners and policymakers. And you'll see that throughout, that we have some new programs of research that reflect this emphasis. At the same time, the director is very much I don't want to say concerned, that's the wrong word, but very much invested in maintaining the rigorous scientific standards for the technical quality of the research that we fund, ensuring that the methods applied are appropriate to the research questions that are asked, and that the results obtained are both valid and reliable. And the director also makes an explicit acknowledgement or statement about the fact that the work that we fund includes a variety of research and statistical methods. And so you'll see that reflected in the slides today. So not only do we have a legislative mission charged by Congress, and we have the director's priorities, but each of the research centers has a particular set of responsibilities. The National Center for Education Research, in short, supports rigorous research that addresses the nation's most pressing education needs from early childhood to adult education. The Special Education Research Center, on the other hand, I shouldn't say on the other hand, similarly supports a rigorous and comprehensive program of special education research designed to expand the knowledge and understanding of infants, toddlers, and students with or at risk for disabilities from birth through high school. So what you'll notice is that the real distinction between the two research centers does not lie in the type of research that we carry out or in the rigor or types of methodologies, but primarily in the population of interest for the two centers. So the Special Education Center actually funds research from infancy all the way through the end of 12th grade, or the age at which students age out of being able to receive funding from IDEA. The National Center for Education Research, on the other hand, starts funding research in the pre-kindergarten years, so ages 3 and 4, and funds research all the way through post-secondary and including adult education, which, as you may know, encompasses a wide range of different kinds of programs. One of the questions I frequently get is, what do you currently fund, and how is the work that I'm interested in doing, how does that fit in to the work of the Institute? So for the presentation today, I've included a quick overview of the different programs of research that we have funded over the years and our total investment. So you'll notice on the slide that's up right now, you see titles of programs that have asterisks next to them. Those are the programs that are currently or that were competed for fiscal 2013 and what we anticipate continuing to compete in fiscal 2014. The ones that do not have asterisks next to them are ones that are either, if you will, historical programs, so programs like the Preschool Curriculum Evaluation Research Program and the Social and Character Development Program. Both of those were programs that were established back in 2002, 2003, 2004, and had a limited duration. The R&D centers, we do not at this point anticipate having R&D centers next year, in particular due to fiscal constraints, which I'll talk about in a minute. The predoctoral research training program, we are currently in conversation and have not yet made a decision about whether to compete that for fiscal 2014. I'm just looking at my slide here. And then the Reading for Understanding Research Initiative was competed for 1 year and will not be recompeted. But what you will notice, and I'm going to move to the visual presentation as opposed to the table, what you will notice is that the vast number of our awards nearly 3/4 of the awards that we make are actually in our education research competition, which we like to think of as our parent program or main program of research. And I'm going to spend a good portion of my talk today reminding you all about what's involved in that program and pointing out some new changes in fiscal 13 and things to think about for fiscal 14. Similarly, in terms of money, just so you know that the actual amount of money invested is similarly tracks in terms of the number of awards, but it is important to note that our R&D center investment is actually a substantial amount of money, even though the number of awards made are smaller. All right, just for your information. For the National Center for Special Education Research, you'll see a similar pattern. The National Center for Special Education Research was only authorized in, I think it's 2004. I'm realizing I don't have my dates. Oh, 2006. There it is right in front of me. Since 2006, so the number of awards is smaller than the National Center for Education Research, but you'll see that as in the education research portfolio, the vast number of awards, the most awards are made in their primary competition, the special education research competition, and our other programs have smaller numbers of awards and smaller investments. But I hope you are, I don't know if impressed is the right word, but at least can see that there has been a fairly substantial investment over the past decade in terms of research, both in the Education Research Center and in the Special Education Research Center. And we hope that that investment will continue going forward. For those of you who read the President's budget request, I thought I would pull out some pieces of the language for you all to look at. The first is to note that there is overall an increase of $12.5 million over 2012 levels for our research development and dissemination line. Unlike other agencies and other institutions, the RD&D line, as we like to call it, includes not only research funding for grants, but also includes funding for aspects of the National Center for Education Evaluation and regional assistance. And so the total RD&D line does not, in fact, refer only to funding for research grants. However, in the President's budget request this year, there is a request, a request for an increase that would allow us to award up to $30 million in new research and development grants. Now, so you know that that $30 million really reflects initial year awards, not the total amount of awards for the duration of the project. That would enable us to actually return to fiscal 2010 funding levels in terms of the amount of money expended. The funding for special education research in the President's budget is flat and requests a total of $49.9 million to cover both new awards in fiscal 13 as well as ongoing projects funding for continuation awards. So the $30 million in the prior bullet only reflects new awards. So our cycle is a little off, and so I think I comment on this every time I present. So we actually, our timing of when our new RFAs are released and when our awards are announced is a little off cycle. So what I've got here in this next slide gives you a sense of what our typical timeline is, and so you can see where we are in our timeline. And so what I'm going to do over the next few slides is explain to you, describe, share with you what our opportunities were for fiscal 2013 and share with you what I know about what's going to be happening in 2014. So here's the timeline, and just for the ease of exposition, I'll talk only about the June deadline. As you all know, I hope, or many of you know, we have single competitions that go for an entire fiscal year, and we have 2 deadlines that are available. Not all competitions are permitted to submit to both deadlines, but for our primary research competitions, the Education Research Program and the Special Education Research Program, there is both a June and a September deadline. So if you are anticipating submitting an application in June, the RFAs will be released in early March 2013, hopefully end of February, but early March is safer to say given the way things have been working these days. Letters of intent for that competition are due in mid-April. Applications are due in mid to late June. It's typically the 3rd Thursday in June, but those dates have not been set finally yet, so I just wanted to leave us a little bit of wiggle room there. We have our peer review meeting for applications submitted in June in late October, so we just held our peer review meeting for applications submitted last June. last week, and then our awards are announced in early March. So that's sort of the cycle. And so as you can see, we're actually, all of our applications for fiscal 2013 have already been submitted, and we're in the process of reviewing those. All right, we good? Okay. So if you're interested in identifying funding opportunities, what's the best way to do that? The first thing to do is to go to our website. Now, I know a lot of faculty and grants officers will go to the ed.gov website and look at grant opportunities from the ed site. I would encourage you to start at the Institute of Education Sciences website at ies.ed.gov/funding. That site has the most up-to-date information and has current information. I would encourage all of you, if you're not already signed up for the IES Newsflash, to do so. The Newsflash actually, again, is another way for you to know when our RFAs are released, if there are any changes that have to be made, when new awards are announced. So it's a great resource for keeping up to date. For those of you who read the Federal Register, and I'm sure there are plenty of you on the phone today, our funding opportunities are announced in the Federal Register as well, and you should anticipate that coming out again in late February or early March with our full announcement of expected awards for 2014, or expected competitions. In the meantime, what should you do to get ready? I would encourage all of you to review current requests for applications that you are intending to submit under. While we do make modifications to the RFAs going forward, we actually are in a relatively stable position. So the topic areas that we're competing, the research goals, those have been relatively stable for over the past several years. And then I want to encourage everyone to reach out to the program officers in both of our research centers. We're all doctoral level staff, we're all researchers, and it's our job to work with applicants, and we really enjoy it. So if you or members of your faculty are hesitant to do so, or concerned that they won't get feedback or won't hear back from us, please encourage them to reach out to us. It is something that we're expected to do, and like I said, most of us really do enjoy it. And you can always email me directly too, and I can put you in touch with the appropriate program officers. So this is our web page, and I just wanted to put it up there just as a reminder that this is a great source for you all to look at. Not only do we have information about funding opportunities, but it's a great way for you to learn about what is going on at the Institute at the current moment. I do also want, if on the right hand along that top bar, there's a thing that says News and Events. And if you click on that, you'll see that there's a place for you to sign up for the news flash. If you click on that, it'll take you to a page that looks like this. And I want to encourage you again, if you've not signed up, to do so, and to make sure that you not only click the general IES News and Information button, but that you click the 2 Research Center buttons as well, because that's how you will get information about RFAs and about awards being announced, as well as other work that we're funding. But what you really want to know about is the funding opportunities page. And regardless of whether you sign up for the newsflash or not, the funding opportunities place will still be there. So if you go to the main page, you see on that bar across the right, there is the funding opportunities page. And if you click on that, if you hover over it, you'll get that drop-down menu that you can see right now. If you click on the funding opportunities button, tab, whatever the appropriate tech term is, it'll take you to this page. One of the things that we have tried to do in terms of changes this year is implement plain language policies, trying to make it so that information and requirements are more clearly identified and more clearly accessible. So here we've laid out what we believe are the 5 steps that you need to follow, or that would be good to follow in order to apply for an IES grant. The first is identifying a current funding opportunity that matches your research interests, and then figure out when the deadlines are. You can't figure out the deadlines yet because they're not up, but you could at least look to see what's the right topic and what's the right goal. The next would be to register for a funding opportunities webinar. So we do have a series of webinars that will start once the request for applications are released. So in March and April are pretty heavy webinar months, and then again we have a repeated cycle typically in June and July in order to provide up-to-date and up-to-the-minute, if you will, information about current opportunities. So if you've not participated in an IES webinar, I do want to encourage you to look at that information. Then you need to make sure you download 3 critical documents. The appropriate request for application, right, the one that you're submitting to from our webpage, the application submission guide, which is also located on our funding opportunities page, and if you were to scroll down at this page you would see that, as well as the application package. The application package is available on G5, and at the end of this presentation I'll show you what a G5 page looks like, although I assume that most of you are very familiar with that. So we also encourage everyone to submit letters of intent, not required, but strongly encouraged. And then you submit your application before the deadline. So I'm going to go through this in more detail. So how do you figure out what's the right program, right? This is a big question that we get, and again, something that program officers can help you with. But let me give you our quick guide right for here. The first is, and you may laugh, but this is very important, please do make sure you read the requests for applications. We invest a lot of time in writing and preparing the requests for applications, and we try to make them as clear as possible. But if you read the requests for applications prior to calling a program officer, that will really help make sure that you have a conversation that is the most useful both for you and for the program officer. Then you want to make sure that you review the announced topics and methodological requirements. Although we try to be relatively consistent from year to year, things do change, and it's important for you to make sure that the particular research question that you were planning to ask under a particular topic and in reference to a particular goal has not changed. So do make sure you spend some time with that. And then if you're really just trying to get a sense of what are the kinds of programs that are funded, say for example, under our cognition and student learning topic as opposed to our reading and writing topic, it can be helpful to look through the abstracts of currently funded projects to get a sense of the differentiation between them. Almost all of our projects now have full structured abstracts available, as well as information about publications that have come from those projects. And so if you go to either of those 2 web pages, you should be able to navigate from there to the abstracts, and I would encourage you to look at them. All right. So what were the competitions that we competed in fiscal 2013? Just a little bit of decoding here. If you're not familiar with our CFDA numbers, let me just give you a little bit of background. That's the number on the left side of my screen, probably the right, no, it's the left side of your screen too. So 8.4 is the Institute of Education Sciences. .305 tells you that that's in the National Center for Education Research, so in the center that I oversee. The number 324 tells you that it's a special education research program. All right, so those are the main 2 distinctions. And then the alpha at the end, so the A's, D's, E's, and H's that you see there, that's the specific letter that's associated with a specific program. So if you hear me lapsing into talking about the A program versus the B program, I'm referring to that last letter in the CFDA number. So the first 2 programs there are the Education Research Grants and the Special Education Research Grants Program. These are the ones through which we fund the majority of our work and about which I'll spend the majority of time speaking today. We also completed a program in Statistical and Research Methodology in Education, which is really about innovative tools and new methodology for use in education. The Special Education Center this year competed a program called Accelerating the Academic Achievement of Students with Learning Disabilities Research Initiative, A3. Modeled in part on the Reading for Understanding Research Initiative, we do not anticipate that this program will be recompeted in fiscal 2014. Then we have 2 programs where we really are focusing on addressing problems of relevance to the practice community. Our 305E competition, the evaluation of state and local programs and policies, is really focused on creating partnerships between states and districts who have something that they're implementing at their level for which they would like an evaluation to occur. And then the 305H program is the Researcher Practitioner Partnership in Education Research. And we think of this as our seed money grant. It's really meant to incentivize the creation of partnerships between the field and the research community so that together they can identify problems of practice for which research dollars could be wisely used. And I'll talk in more detail about these programs in a few minutes. For 2014, in terms of our research programs, what do we anticipate that we'll have? We anticipate that we will have our regular programs, so 305A and 324A. We anticipate that 305D, the Statistical and Research Methodology and Education program, will continue. And as you may have noticed, on our front page, there's a call for comments on a new research topic. We are proposing for 2014 to bring together our practitioner, practitioner, state, and local focused research programs into a single RFA that will have 3 different topics. The current title of the RFA is Partnerships and Collaborations focused on problems of practice or policy, and it will have 3 topics, somewhat similar to the way the Education Research Grants Program is organized. The first and the last, so the researcher practitioner partnerships and evaluation of state and local programs and policies, will be the same, right, as the ones that we've competed for the past last year. So those will remain the same. They will just be embedded under this umbrella topic. And we're proposing a new topic called Continuous Improvement in Education Research. And I would encourage you, if you've not been to our website, to go look. We have a draft describing the kind of work that we're hoping to fund through that and inviting comments. And we'd really welcome any comments or thoughts that you might have in response to that. So we also fund, so those were our research programs. We also fund research training, and these are our B. See, I'm talking about the alphabet here. These are our B programs, right? 305B and 324B. These are both our research training programs, and similarly, we have an umbrella program, and then we have subtopics underneath. This, for fiscal 2013, at the Education Research Center, competed 2 topics. The first focused on postdoctoral research training program, and the second focused on researcher and policymaker training. And I'll talk about those in just a minute. For 324B, the research training program in special education was focused on early career development and mentoring, and that was a new program. And again, I'll talk about that in greater detail in just a minute. For 2014, we anticipate maintaining our B competitions at this point in time. And like I said, we are in conversation right now about whether to recompete the predoctoral research training program under 305B, but we have not yet made a decision. All right, so for education research and special education research programs. So these are the 305A and 324A programs. And I'm going to talk at a really higher order level about these. And I want to encourage any of you who are interested in more detail to go to our webpage and look at our webinars, where we have information about many of these topic areas and programs, as well as the research goals. So just a refresher and a basic requirement. Each application that is submitted by a principal investigator to the education research or special education research program must address one and only one research topic and one and only one research goal. So there's really a cross. You have a list of research topics and a list of goals, and the PI needs to identify which intersection they wish to apply under, because reviewers evaluate each of your applications in response to that intersection, topic by goal. All right, we have a list currently, we have 10 topics that we currently compete under 305A. Primary changes that we made during fiscal 2013 that might be of interest to you all is that under education technology, we are now accepting exploration applications, which is our research goal. And under reading and writing, we have now made the change that we are inviting applications to develop interventions focused on reading. For the past several years, we had not allowed that, given our investment in Reading for Understanding. People often want to know, how many grants have you funded across these areas? And so here I have a list of, over the past decade, the number of grants that we have funded. I just need to explain that under the Cognition and Student Learning Program, which is the first one there on the left, it's actually 112. I can't get this bar graph to correct. It keeps cutting me off at 100, so I clearly need to get my teenager involved and help me figure out what's going on with my file. However, the other numbers are correct. But what you will see is that the number of grants that have been funded over time tracks pretty nicely with the number of years that the competition has been in existence. So oftentimes people will say, well, gosh, you've hardly funded any English learner competitions. Well, I mean English learner applications. Well, it's only been around for a couple of years, so that's the reason. All right, so I just want to put that out there. Clearly, we're funding a lot, and I hope that we'll get lots of applications from you all and can continue to fund more going forward. Similarly, within special education research, you can see that there are a series of topics. Many of them are parallel, focused on reading and writing or mathematics and science education. But we do have some specific topics that I would like to draw your attention to if you're interested in carrying out research in the area of special education. The first is that we have a program focused on children on the autism spectrum. So if you're interested in carrying out research in autism, please do look at that topic. We also have, I'm just looking here, we have one program really focused on looking at families. This is really unique to the special education topic and reflects the fact that many of the early intervention programs that exist trying to prevent or remediate the needs of students with special needs really happen in the family. So we have a program focused on families of children with disabilities. Otherwise, I think everything is pretty much the same. And again, I think you'll see that the newer programs in the National Center for Special Education Research have the smallest number of applications or the least amount of money for NCSR invested in those topics. What might be of interest to you all interested in special ed is to see that nearly a quarter of the NCSR investment, NCSR is what we like to call the Special Ed Center, is actually focused on early intervention, and then another 20% is focused on how to improve the social and behavioral outcomes of students with disabilities. Just a piece of information. All right, for fiscal 2013, we have 5 research goals, which again has been sort of the standard pattern: exploration, development and innovation, efficacy and replication. It says effectiveness. If it changed to effectiveness this year, in the past it had been scale up, and measurement. We anticipate that these goals will maintain and remain the same for fiscal 2014. Just a quick description of exploration. I'm going to do just a quick sentence because I know I want to make sure we have time for questions. Exploration goals, we invite researchers really to generate hypotheses. A range of different methods are appropriate, but the real purpose here is to explore associations between education outcomes and malleable factors. And there's a lot of different ways one can do that, and if you all have specific questions, I'm happy to address them. Under development and innovation, the purpose of this goal is really to support the development or refinement, I should really say, of an innovative intervention. And we use the word intervention much more broadly than some folks think. So interventions include not only specific curriculum and curriculum of different lengths, but also instructional approaches, as well as programs, sort of understood more widely, maybe a whole school program, or policies. Oops, here we go. There's my second bullet. I knew it was there. Or improve existing interventions, right? So not all interventions are working as well as one might hope. So we also support improvement. One important thing to note is if you come in under development, the whole purpose of supporting research in that area is that there is an iterative component that's inherent to carrying out development work, right? So you create what you think is your best possible intervention, and then you test it out and you learn that maybe there are things that can be fixed. And so our research process requires that you have an iterative component. We expect that you'll collect data both on feasibility and usability in actual education settings. So while you may develop your intervention in your laboratory, maybe we're working with undergraduate students or convenience samples, we really want to make sure that you take the intervention that you've developed out into classrooms and schools where you expect it'll be used and make sure that it functions there. And there's a requirement to collect pilot data. One of the things, I'm going to go back here, one of the things that you will notice that has changed in the RFA is that we have included information at the front of each of the goals about what we expect you to come out of at the end of a goal. So when you're at the end of a grant rather, so when you're thinking about, let's take development for example, you're thinking about, well, what do I need to learn over the course of the project? You have at the beginning of each of the goals in the current RFA a set of expected outcomes. You don't know if you'll get there, but that's the hope, right? The other thing to notice is that in our language around the pilot data, we've included explicit language about level of rigor that one might expect in pilot data. And so I do want to encourage all of you all if you haven't looked at the RFA for 2013, to look at that, because that is a change from last year. All right, efficacy and replication. So the purpose of this goal is to test the what works question, but to test the what works question under relatively controlled circumstances. So here we're really seeking to support research that supports causal inference. It can be an initial efficacy study. It can also be replications, right? So one of the real challenges of education research is that we can have evidence that something works in one setting, but we have limited information about whether it works in another setting. And we're really encouraging researchers to think about whether they're in a good position to test the replication question of a particular intervention. We also allow collection of follow-up data. So if you already have an efficacy study that's ongoing and you're getting positive effects and you want to see whether those effects maintain over time, you can apply for additional funding under this goal. All right. Under effectiveness. Now this was a change. We changed the title from scale up to effectiveness because in point of fact, the amount of resources that we had available wasn't really supporting scale up in the way that it's understood traditionally. The goal here is really to test effectiveness. So efficacy is answering the causal question under controlled circumstances. Effectiveness is really trying to understand the causal impact question under typical conditions, right? So it's not being delivered, the intervention's not being delivered by members of the research team, but rather by typical classroom teachers or whomever the sort of right typical deliverer, if you will, is. We also have a new requirement here that prior to submitting an effectiveness proposal, there must be at least 2 efficacy studies, so 2 smaller studies of the intervention with beneficial and practical impacts on student outcomes documented. So that is a new requirement. That's not going to be going away. So you all want to think about that prior to putting in an effectiveness proposal. And finally, we support work on measurement. So measurement is critical to work that's being done in many, many different areas. And as all of you on the phone know, there are many areas where adequate, valid, and reliable measures do not exist. And we do want to encourage researchers who are well positioned to carry out this kind of work to really think about whether they or a colleague of theirs might be well positioned to put in a measurement application. All right, another question I often get, and I figured I would try to answer it ahead of time, is, well, how does this goal stuff distribute over the grants that we funded? So the goal structure was implemented in 2004 for the National Center for Education Research. So the percentage of funded grants that are represented here only start in 2004. And what you can see is that just under half of the grants that we have awarded are focused on the development of new interventions. Approximately a quarter are focused on efficacy, right, testing efficacy. Another 15% are focused on exploring, generating new hypotheses. And then about 12% are focused on measurement. Goal 4 is labeled a scale up here because that's what we have funded so far. And so far that's only been about 2% of our grants funded. What's important, and from our perspective encouraging to note, is that the number of interventions that are now being tested for efficacy, or the number of grants that are testing interventions for efficacy, has been growing slowly, but it has been growing. And because one of the real concerns that we, and I think many folks in education around the country feel, is, okay, so it's really important to have evidence of efficacy, but there's hardly any evidence that's out there that meets the requirements, say, of the clearinghouse. And so we're starting to see a move in terms of the number of projects that we're funding, suggesting that we've got strong interventions with promise that are now being tested for efficacy. For the Special Education Center, again, they're looking at percentage of funds expended, so this is a little bit different from what I presented before because typically efficacy projects are more expensive, and so when you look at the distribution of awards this way, what you'll see is that approximately 43% or exactly 43% of the NICSR budget has been focused on efficacy and replication projects, and 37% has been focused on development and innovation. Another, just a point of information, if you look at the developmental level of the projects that we're funding, you'll see that they actually distribute pretty nicely across the spectrum. The only thing I'd like to call out to those of you on the phone, on the call, on the webinar, not quite sure what the right modifier there is, the prepositional phrase, is that we actually have a real need to fund work in the post-secondary adult area. And particularly in the area of, we're really looking at students here who either are at risk for not matriculating into post-secondary, students who are in post-secondary but at risk for not succeeding, as well as the adult education population really generally, really very widely understood. So we have a large percentage, I'm thinking it's about 11% of our adult population who don't have basic reading, writing, and mathematics skills. And we really hope that we can support research that really helps us understand how better to serve these individuals and how better to help them succeed. Similarly, at post-secondary, there are too many students who are at risk for not actually either graduating from high school and matriculating into post-secondary opportunities. And we'd really like to encourage the research community to think about ways that, or research projects that they could complete that could help us support these students, these older students, if you will. Oh, all right. I think there's supposed to be a NICSR slide here in terms of the same developmental level, and I appear to have lost it, so I apologize ahead of time, and I'll send a corrected slide so that that can get up there. What you'll notice there is that their emphasis, they have a strong emphasis in the birth through early childhood age group, as you might expect given what I said before. All right. Just wanted to put these levels up here. Again, something that changed in fiscal 2013 and I imagine will remain the same in 2014 is that for the first time we have actually put maximums in terms of the amount of funding that can be requested for each of the goals. Given the current fiscal climate, I anticipate that we will continue to have maximums, and I do want to encourage applicants to pay attention to those maximums. You don't want your application not being reviewed as a function of of having a mess up in the budget. All right, so these are just award levels for you to see. All right, so how am I doing on time here? I just want to...
About 20 minutes.
20 minutes, all right. So let me just quickly go through our additional programs so that I can, and again, we've already talked about these at a general level, and I just want to provide a little bit more information. So under our research training programs, we have the postdoctoral research training program, which I assume many of you are familiar with, and this new program on researcher and policymaker training in the education sciences. So the postdoc program is for institutions to establish postdoctoral training programs, and there are many different ways that this can be constructed. The important thing for you all to know is that the funds go to the institution, and then the institution sets up a postdoctoral training program. We have a new program that we competed this year and will be competing going forward. This program is focused on two different kinds of training. The first is researcher training. So as many of you know, you may complete your research training, complete your PhD, complete your postdoc, go out, be in a faculty position, be in a research position, and realize that there are additional methodological skills that you don't have that would be really important for you to have. So I'm going to put myself on the line here and say, when I was in graduate school, the analysis of variance was the analytic strategy that we used, as well as regression. But in education research these days, you need to know hierarchical linear modeling. You need to understand how to handle nested data. There have been changes over the past, I don't even want to count how many years it's been, but since I was in graduate school, and HLM is now a course that's de rigueur. So one of the courses that we have supported in the past through an unsolicited mechanism really focuses on how do you carry out randomized clinical trials in education settings, and there's a big focus on handling nested designs. There are many other types of things, maybe the use of single case design, for example, if you're in the area of special education. And so the researcher training focus was really a call out to the field. Look, if there's an area where you see a real need for researcher training to be carried out, put in an application to do that, and we'll provide support for that. At the same time, policymakers and practitioners often want to make use of education research, but often don't have a lot of training in how to interpret research evidence or how to use it to help inform their decisions. And so we solicited applications this year for folks to propose policymaker training courses that are intended to share evidence from rigorous research with education practitioners and policymakers working on a specific program or policy. Right, so I'm going to throw this out here. For example, the use of teacher value-added techniques to evaluate teacher programs. Here's a really, really important policy for which there is actually a fair amount of research, and not all of the research is aligned. So this might be a real good topic, for example, where having a policymaker training could be both very relevant and very important for thinking about how do you make good decisions if you're a policymaker about the use of value-added models. So that's just one example. I'm sure there are many, many others. So that's new, and I anticipate both of those going forward in fiscal 14. Under the special education program, they only competed, I shouldn't say they, I should say we, only competed the research training program in special education, and we only competed an early career development and mentoring program this year. They did not compete the postdoctoral program. It's possible that they will next year. Again, no decision has been made at this time. But the early career development and mentoring is a new program really intended to provide support for young scholars who are carrying out research in the area of special education and who really would like to be able to begin a program of research, but who may not have adequate support at their current institutions. And so the early career development and mentoring program is really targeted toward those individuals. And if you are an early career scholar in this area, I would encourage you to look at that RFA. Similarly, the A3 initiative, I'm not going to talk about that since it won't be competed going forward. This is really just for your information. Stats and research methodology in education, again, is focused on expanding and improving methodological and statistical tools for education researchers. If you want to be the next person to do HLM, this is your RFA. Again, the real purpose here is that it's really meant to improve the design of research studies, analysis of research data, and interpretation of research findings in the area of education. So just that clause isn't there, but should be. I've talked a little bit about the evaluation of state and local policies. Again, here we provide support for rigorous evaluation of education programs or policies that are paid for and implemented by the state or local education agencies. What IES pays for is the evaluation. So we're essentially providing funding for the research, the impact research question. Our new researcher-practitioner partnership in education research is intended to support the partnering of researchers with state and local education agencies in the development of joint research projects. Again, it's really seed money to try to create these partnerships at the outset and create research questions that draw on both expertise from both parties, if you will. All right, information about funding. Again, just note we've got maximum awards and maximum amount of years. Maximum amount of awards is new, maximum dollar amounts. All right, so now you've decided to apply. What's next? Again, I covered this earlier. I'm going to go a little bit quickly through this so that we have time for questions, but I just want to put this out for you. Again, I want to encourage everyone, please contact our program officers. We are your best resource. We are there to help. We're associated with topics and/or competitions. At the end of each RFA, you have full contact information. Feel free to look at the 2013 competitions and contact that program officer. If that person is no longer the right one, they'll send you to the right person. All right, it's also available on our website. Please submit a letter of intent. Again, it's not required. Note that the reviewers will not see it. It's actually only something that we see, but it's important to submit them for two reasons. One, it's a great way for us to provide feedback and make sure you're in the right goal, the right topic, the right RFA. It's also really important for our standards and review office, because it allows them to make sure that they have tapped adequate reviewer expertise. This is particularly important if you're proposing an application in an area that is not one that we see a lot in. So for example, if you're working with visually impaired learners, that's a very specific topic. It would require expertise in a very specific area. And if you put it in a letter of intent, that allows our review staff to recruit appropriate reviewers ahead of time. Due dates. Important thing about the due dates is that they are firm and fixed. They are not flexible, and they go to the second, right? So it's 4:30 Eastern Standard Time and 0 seconds. Please do not be the researcher who submits it at 4:30 and 2 seconds, because that will be considered a late application. In fact, we encourage everyone to try to submit maybe 2 weeks in advance, because then you can actually go in, you can look at what you submitted, and you can see if you uploaded all the right stuff. We have had cases where people have uploaded the wrong version of a proposal or the wrong version of a budget, and it actually can cause problems for the review, and we don't have any way to upload new information after that final submission date. So please upload it early. Grants packages are available at grants.gov. This is not new. For those of you who don't know about grants.gov, make sure you're signed up. Make sure you've got all the right information that you need. There was a change where there was a move from the registry system, and I'm just make sure that all your DUNS numbers and everything are up to date. Do this early. You can do this now, and then you don't have to worry about it in the spring. 3 documents that you need to submit an application. The request for applications on our website, the submission guide, which tells you what to fill in, on your cover pages, what information goes where, and then the actual application package, which is really just the shell where you fill in all of the required information. We have an independent peer review process. We compose panels. Applications are reviewed for compliance and responsiveness to the RFA, so that's why you need to make sure you know the RFA. All that are considered compliant and responsive are assigned to a review panel. We have 2 to 3 review panels members who conduct a primary review of each of the applications. And then the most competitive, there's a triage process, so only the most competitive applications are reviewed by the full panel, which is what happens in October. All right. New things, the Standards and Review Office has put up information for all of the individuals who served on our review panels for the fiscal 12 competition. So if you're interested in knowing who the reviewers were for a particular competition or a particular topic area, please go to this webpage and you can find all that information. The other thing I want to encourage you to look at is the Resources for Researchers page. They've got links for faculty and researchers. There's lots of information there about prior webinars. Everything is still up from 2013. We've got full transcripts as well as slides. Really good resource. This is the page. Call us. Be in touch. We want to help. So that's the main message of this one. And you can call us now. Even though the RFA is not out yet, we're more than happy to talk with folks. And in terms of notification, everyone receives email notification of the status of their application. All applicants, whether you're funded or not, receive copies of reviewer comments. And if you're not awarded the first time, and believe me that you would be in good company, plan on resubmitting and talk to your program officer. I think, yep, this is our funding page and my email address. If you have questions that we're not able to get to today, please feel free to send them to me, and I will do my best to answer them. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Albro. We're now going to turn it over to questions. If you have a question that you'd like Dr. Albro to answer, please send it to federalupdate@missouri.edu. We do have several questions already in the pipeline.
Excellent.
So let's get started with those. First question is, individual would like to know if you can provide an update on when the next Centers for International Business Education RFP will be released, if you have any knowledge of that.
So that is not something that is competed through our institute, so I actually do not have any information.
Okay. Is it possible that we can just get that question to the right person?
So yeah, you can email it to me and I'll see if I can find out who the right contact person would be.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
This question is, can you provide some additional information about undergraduate STEM education initiatives sponsored?
So that's actually a really interesting question. So we have our post-secondary and adult education topic, which I referenced, right, as an area where we need more work. And under that topic, we have specific language that asks for projects looking at gateway math and science courses, right? So trying to figure out how to provide support to students in those gateway courses, trying to make those gateway courses reach more students and be more successful. So there's some language in the RFA there under that, and so if you're interested in that, I would encourage you to both read that topic description, reach out to Hiromi Ono, who is our program officer for that area, and she can talk with you about the work that we're doing in that area, or that we're supporting.
Okay. This next question has a little bit of a lead up, so I'm going to read it off to you. There's a great deal of research on how children learn to read and write, but so far there is limited understanding of how children learn math and science. Math can be learned as a language or as a computational tool. We won't have sufficient American youth entering STEM fields until we leap this hurdle. While they do well with computation and tests, they lack the creativity to make the leap to innovation. Will funds go to this kind of basic research?
So, we do fund actually a fair amount of mathematics and science research and yes, a lot of it is tackling these kinds of questions. So we fund research in mathematics and science education under our mathematics and science education topic, but that is not the only place where we see work in that area. In fact, if you look at our cognition and student learning portfolio, which is sort of our basic science portfolio where you do basic laboratory research and try to translate that into education practice, 2/3 of that portfolio is actually focused on questions of how kids learn mathematics and or science. And so we have a strong and robust portfolio that looks at that, and if you are interested in carrying out research in the area of math and science, I would really encourage you to reach out to one of several program officers. The Education Technology Program area is another area, and I think that we actually have funded some work in our English learners area as well, looking at how do we support English learners in the context of mathematics and science. So I think the short answer is yes.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Again, if you would like a question to be directed to Dr. Albro, please send it to federalupdate@missouri.edu. Another question. What are the pathways for coordinating IES with the education offices within the other agencies like NIH, NSF, etc.?
So I don't know exactly what you mean by pathways. Certainly if we and I believe the other agencies as well, require that all principal investigators include a listing of current and pending support in their short VITAs that they upload. And then when we review applications, we do look to make sure that the applications that are being submitted, say to NSF or NIH, are not duplicative. If you are someone who is lucky enough to hit the jackpot, right, and you find that a proposal that is similar in nature is put up for funding, or is, how do I want to say this, is competitive for funding in both NSF and NIH and IES, we do talk with program officers and coordinate funding across the efforts. As you know, the government is prohibited from funding duplicative research, and so we don't ever want to do that. We certainly have lots of contacts across both of the agencies where we try to coordinate our efforts and make sure that if I get an applicant, for example, comes to talk to me and it sounds like their proposal is really better suited for an NSF funding stream, I will recommend them to the appropriate NSF program officer and vice versa, similarly for NIH.
Okay, thank you. Does the director have any discretionary funds to support pilots in new areas or special interest areas that might not be included?
So we have an unsolicited competition, which is what the discretionary funds are. It is a very small competition, and it is to support research in areas that aren't covered. I will tell you, however, that thinking about that almost everything can be supported through one of our research topics. Now I know it's not everything, and there are a couple of areas that jump out immediately. So if you want to study, for example, the teaching of social studies or history just in terms of history or social studies as opposed to reading or writing around it, that is not an area that we cover. And foreign languages, the teaching of foreign languages are not covered through our main programs. I think those are the primary two ones that we get questions about. So there is unsolicited money, but it's not very much, I guess is just really to put out there.
But basically, people can always ask.
People can always ask, and there is an unsolicited funding opportunity, and I don't know if that's up yet, but it will be up shortly. And those are short 6-page prospecti you should submit, and it's accepted on a rolling basis, so you'll know relatively quickly.
Okay. We've had a couple of questions of a political nature.
Oh, those are my favorite ones to answer.
I know, really. If there are any changes in the administration at the presidential level, do you anticipate that there will be any impacts on IES's current funding plans?
So one of the wonderful things about IES is that we are funded by ESRA, the Education and Sciences Reform Act, which is separate from ESEA, the Education Elementary and Secondary Education Act, right? So they're two separate acts. And our director is actually appointed for a 6-year term. And this was done intentionally so that our director is in place across transitions at the presidential level. So the Institute's funding priorities are set by the director, not by the secretary. And so we actually do not anticipate any changes in the research trajectory as a function of the presidential election. So we are relatively independent, certainly compared to the program offices, who will certainly be much more affected.
Okay, thank you. Again, if you have a question for Dr. Albro, please send it to federalupdate@missouri.edu. Another question, are there any special considerations given to proposals from predominantly undergraduate institutions, such as are given to those institutions by NSF and NIH?
You know, we don't. So we are a relatively small funding organization, and so we don't have lots of separate funding streams. We try to concentrate our funding streams. I will tell you that we do provide webinar support to folks coming from HBCUs, for example, from small undergraduate institutions, for young investigators, and really what I would encourage anyone from a predominantly undergraduate institution to do is to reach out to the program officer and talk with them early on, because we can really help you think about how do you craft your application that in a way that will be competitive and really makes it clear that you have the adequate resources to carry out the research, because that's often the biggest question that you would find at an undergraduate institution.
Okay, thank you. We have a question. Do you know which of the national centers will be competed in the next few years?
So we do not know what which R&D centers will be competed in part that has to do with fiscal constraints, right? So given that the R&D center lines are $2 million a year, right up to $10 million for each of the R&D centers. Making decisions about that requires a juggling not only of our need to fund R&D centers, but also available funds. So I don't have a plan for you at this point.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple of more questions. Again, if you have a question for Dr. Albro, please send it to federalupdate@missouri.edu. A process question. In the letter of intent, is it appropriate and useful to suggest methodological expertise needed to evaluate one's proposal?
Sure, I think it's actually really helpful if you can articulate sort of the methodological expertise that you're evaluating or what that you think might be required for our review panel to take into consideration. I think that would certainly be helpful.
Okay. We have one last question. It's actually more of just a comment from a viewer who says, what we need is a national center for STEM education that would bring together research from education, NSF, NIH, all in regards to STEM education. Any possibility that your agency could bring people together to work on this?
Again, that's really a funding issue. So we are, we have been talking with NSF and trying to think about ways to sort of bring together our investment. We do have 2 R&D centers that are specifically focused on math education, math ed and science ed. So we have, in 2010, we funded a center focused on the National Center on, hang on, I got to remember the title, on cognition and math instruction. That's focusing on a redesign of connected math. So it's working on an NSF developed curriculum, trying to improve it and make it even better. And we have a similar program on science education that was looking at a redesign of Holt and Foss, but we do not have any plans that I'm aware of to create a single center that would bring together all of the STEM research across the government, which might actually be quite challenging given the amount of it, right? There's just so much. But certainly we do talk across the different governmental agencies and try to make sure that we're leveraging what we're learning across all these different institutes and agencies.
Thank you. A question in regards to the funding levels for research in post-secondary and adult education and learning. Why is that funding level so low? Are the number of applications also low?
I think it really does reflect the fact that we've received few applications. The post-secondary and adult education topics are also relatively new. So if you go back to the slide where I laid out sort of the timeline of when topics came online, that particular topic, I can't remember exactly when it was. I want to say 2007, but it's one of our newer programs. But it also really reflects the fact that we see few applications, particularly in the area of adult education. We're seeing more in the area of post-secondary, but adult education continues to be a place where we desperately need research and really don't see nearly as many applications in that area as we would like. So if you are interested in carrying out that work, please do reach out to Meredith Larson. Meredith is our program officer overseeing adult education, and she will be glad to work with you and help you to develop an application in that area. So thanks, a really important question.
Thank you. Again, last call for questions, federalupdate@missouri.edu. Any last questions? If a question happens to come in after we've shut down, we'll either try to answer it in our next segment. Dr. Albro is going to stay with us for one more session, or we'll make sure we get it to her by email, and you can get answers to your questions that way. Thank you, Dr. Albro. Please join us again at the bottom of the hour. She's going to be talking about grants, policies, and procedures. So please join us at the bottom of the hour for that presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.